This is my latest book, The Senai Children, Volume 1, Earth, by Joël Teclin, and a saga of spiritual adventure across space and time. I will read you the blurb. December 1970, midnight. In a deserted Munich suburb at a dismal bus stop, a young rebel shivers under a driving sleet. His long hair gathers icicles while he ponders. Should he burn his bridges and flee impending prison time? As the bus appeared out of the swirling mist and stops, he shakes off any lingering self-doubt and steps in. Little does he know, he is embarking on an adventure far more demanding than his free spirit can imagine. It is the start of a journey that will take him halfway around the globe to distant India and the most remote reaches of the Himalayas. Embracing the life of a spiritual mendicant, he is forced into choices he never knew himself capable of, as he plunges headlong into a quest that began centuries ago and may find its conclusion in a far-off, uncharted future. Only when he confronts the specter of violent death will he understand that all his life experiences must be integrated into one rich, all-encompassing sweep of existence that stretches infinitely across the ages in an unstoppable ascent of perpetual evolution. So this book also has a foreword by Kalki Teclin, my daughter. And yes, I hope you will enjoy it. Here is the book.
Good evening and welcome back to Studio One. We now have a very interesting topic of discussion, the truth about reality in fiction. Our guests joining this discussion are Kiran Manral, Mona Verma, Rishi Sethi, and Dipankar Mukharjee. Author, TEDx speaker, columnist, and mentor, Kiran Manral in previous avatars has been a journalist, researcher, festival curator, and entrepreneur. She has received multiple awards such as the Women's Achievers Award by Young Environmentalist Association and the International Women's Day Award 2018 from Indian Council for UN Relations, supported by the Ministry of Women and Child Welfare, Government of India, for excellence in the field of writing. Mona Verma is an award-winning author of 12 works of fiction. She had edited various science journals, self-help books, biographies, and is a regular feature writer for online newspapers. Her books have been subject of theses for many research scholars, and excerpts from her book have been used in ICSE ELT series. She is on board of various universities as an advisory expert and is much sought as visiting faculty for creative writing, haiku, and limericks. She has been featured in Incredible Women of India talk shows. Dr. Rishi Sethi is an acclaimed interventional cardiologist and professor of cardiology at King George's Medical University, Lucknow. He also has a passion for biomedical innovations and is a nominated member of the Senate at IIT Kanpur. He has contributed immensely to medical literature and has edited 3 books on cardiology. The one thing he believes has learned the most is to have faith. In his debut novel, The Sage, he tries to debate the conflicts of human mind from varied perspectives. Playing subtly in the grey and complex world of human subconscious, he tries to discover, together with his readers, the miracles of faith and love. Dipankar Mukharjee is the publisher and director of Readomania, one of India's youngest traditional publishing houses. Under his leadership, the house has produced over 100 books in just 5 years, with some critically acclaimed titles as well. He is an engineer and holds an MBA degree from IIT Madras and had been in the corporate world for 9 years before becoming an entrepreneur. We request Dipankar Mukherjee to begin the discussion.
Thank you, Rainy. Thank you so much for the introductions and a warm welcome to all the panelists and the viewers. Today we're going to discuss fiction, and we have three wonderful creators whom I call God of Fantasyland because each one of them act like God in creating characters, in creating settings, and telling stories that take us to a different make-believe world. So welcome on board. We're just going to fly off into a wonderful, wonderful discussion. Today we've been told that we're going to discuss truth versus reality in fiction. And my first question around that to all three panelists would be, is there more reality in fiction or more fiction in reality? And I'd like to start with the only man apart from me in the panel, on the panel rather, Dr. Rishi Sethi. Dr. Rishi, what do you have to say about this?
Firstly, I was hoping we would start with the ladies, but anyhow. So,
Let's change traditions for once. Okay, I think he's
so
stuck. You want? Is he there?
yeah, I am. Yeah, I am.
Okay,
Can you hear me? Yeah.
we can hear you. Continue.
So your question is there more fiction in reality, or is there
Or
more
more
reality
reality.
in fiction? I believe they are not parallelly, completely alienated universe from each other. I think they run a parallel course, and there is a certain amount of degree of reality that we tend to involve in fiction, and of course there are some moments of like fiction in reality. If you ask more, I believe there's nothing such as absolutely true fiction. Whatever we write in terms of our story will contain, to the varied degrees, uh, reality that we have either felt or observed in the world around us. So there absolutely can be no true fiction. It has to be a reality, being, wearing a garment of different stories and creating a fictionate world that we create for our readers. So there would definitely be more reality in fiction. However, I think that, even every, if you take a if you want to answer it on the reverse way, is there more fiction in reality? That's also true, because every life and probably every story revolving around society will contain moments, will be punctuated by events, situations, be it emotional, be it social, be it some miracles, that will have a tinge close to fiction. So there would be a certain amount of fiction in reality, but there is a
I think.
lot of reality in
Thank you,
fiction.
Dr. Rishi. You gave a very politically correct answer to start the panel, and I'm glad that you put it that way. I'm going to take the question now to Kiran Manral. Kiran, before I put the question to you, first of all, congratulations. As we speak, your book has been longlisted for the Oxford Book Cover Prize 2022. So, congratulations on that. And now, may I request you to please answer the question? You're not audible. I think you're on mute.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dipankar, and congratulations to you too for your book. And I'm going to take no credit at all for this because, it's all Mishta's work. She's designed a wonderful cover, and the cover has thankfully got the appreciation it deserves. Is there more truth in fiction, reality in fiction, or the vice versa? Mark Twain said something very relevant that still holds good, right? That truth is stranger than fiction. So, when we think of certain things that have happened in the world, I don't think anyone could have imagined that such things could have happened, like the Holocaust, for instance. Maybe the Indrani Mukherjee case. There's so many things that happen every single day that, as a writer, one really wonders whether we could have been able to conjure up such things. And the elephant man, so many things. I mean, little things. You open the newspaper up every day, you find something that you think, would I be able to think that up, and would I be able to write it? And truth definitely is stranger than fiction, but fiction has to stay relevant to the truth. Fiction has to be believable. Truth can be implausible, it can be unbelievable, because it is the truth and it has happened somewhere. And I think that very fine boundary between the two of it is where we, as writers, as creators, as authors, tread, because we have to take off from the reality and build our fiction so it is plausible and not implausible, and the reader can believe it. But we have to start from that base, as Rishi very rightly says, from the base of reality. We can't base everything in fiction. Even if you look at science fiction, they start with the humans in space. That is the prime thing. We know humans, right? Uh,
Absolutely, absolutely. But 2 points from there. First of all, there is a new twist in Imrani Mukherjee case, and I hope you know that. He's claimed
yes,
African doctor is alive in somewhere in Kashmir. So bingo,
Kashmir.
that could be really good fiction. And second point for all, God could be an author, and he's suddenly written some interesting books, and all of them have come alive. We don't know. Okay, on that, Mona. Incidentally, all four of us are from different cities, and that's the power of digital. We have Rishi from Lucknow, you from Bombay, Kiran, Mona from Haridwar, and me from Delhi. So, on that note, Mona, what do you have to say about reality versus fiction?
Well, thank you for that question. Thank you, PILF, for having me again today, and it's an honor to share the days with Kiran and Rishi. So, coming back to your question, Dipankar, I believe both for writers and readers alike, it's sometimes very hard to tell the difference between fiction and reality, which we also might call as non-fiction. So, in general, fiction, where it refers to the plot, the settings, the characters created from our imagination, reality refers to the factual stories focused on actual events and people. So, the elements at the end of the day are same in both of them. But then, why the genre is sometimes blurred? I will give you an example because both Rishi and Kiran have already cited very relevant points here. I will start with an example. If you anybody is over here, they have read Cold Blood by Truman Capote. It's widely regarded as one of the best works of nonfiction to significantly blur the line between fiction and nonfiction. Now, it is a story of Herb Clutter who stays on a farm with his family. And there are two ex convicts who plot to a plan to rob the family, but there is a misunderstanding and they end up killing Clutter's family. Now, Capote, as a writer, read about the murders in the New York Times article, and he took his very good friend Harper Lee to Holcomb to interview the town subject. But neither Capote nor Lee figure in the book itself. He instead tells us all that happened in those 15 years in a very compelling, vivid, and a very dramatic manner. So, to write a great non-fiction, we can make our non-fiction stories read beautifully like fiction so that our readers are as unruptured by fact as they are by fantasy. And it's another point over here that I might want to make is that it's hard to tell the difference between fiction and non-fiction, especially in the hands of a very skilled author. So if non-fiction uses many of the techniques of fiction to make it more appealing to the readers, then the books don't sound very didactic and they're appreciated and enjoyed and also ensure a wider reading bracket.
Very interesting point, a very elaborate point, I must say.
Thank you.
Taking it from there, we all know that the main objective of a fiction author is to create a parallel universe to a large extent. How different does this universe need to be from reality? Does it need to be different at all? Or if yes, how different? I'll this time start again with Rishi. What is your opinion?
So I think both the questions would be a little, there was a considerable overlap between both questions, and I would stick to my, point that there's absolutely nothing like an absolutely true fiction. I mean, uh, whatever we write, I mean, whatever we create as authors, I mean, if you go back to Professor Jocker's example that there are only six basic plots, or if you go back back to Aristotle and see that there's only one plot, that there is a protagonist, and then there is a change of fortune and how he responds to the change of fortune. What we derive, what we create as fictionate stories
Sorry,
are
I'll just
just.
interrupt you here, Rishi. My question is not generic. I wanted to ask you. So, in your body of work, how close do you keep fiction to reality?
Oh, so
What
if
choice?
it's okay. So if it relates to my work, I mean, I would say that we like everybody to believe that we are writing fiction. We create a universe that is captivating for them, and I create the same kind of universe. If that universe is very close to our life, that's another way of telling which I write. It can be a completely different way if that way of telling, that box is completely alienated from our normal life. I mean, you can write any science fiction or anything like that. But the fact is that until and unless it communicates with the readers or the audience in our sense, with some degree of common facts about human emotions, human conflicts, an idea, a thought, we may give it any garb that you want. I write in a way that it is very close to real life scenario, but you can write it in any other way. You can create a Star Trek, but the interaction between two characters essentially have to have a human connect, and whatever we are discussing, whatever we are writing beneath that fiction, beneath the box that we are enclosing, needs to have reality in terms of human emotions, human connections, relationships, conflicts, ideas, and that I believe is quite universal across all fictions. I write it very very close to real life. That's my style of writing, but you can take it anyway.
Interesting. And that takes me before Kiran, I'll bring it to Mona because Mona has written something around Banaras, and that particular point is seemingly close to reality as compared to fiction. So, what is your opinion on that? What do you believe in? Do you prefer putting in a lot of reality in your fiction or a little bit of reality in your fiction?
Well, thank you for that question. So, when you are talking about a parallel universe over here, whether it is Banaras or any other book, the Devi Sutras also that I'm writing on, I'm reminded of this quote that every book has a voice and no two people hear the same. So, any which way, there is a parallel universe when between the reader as well as the writer. But in today's time, what is happening that we are catering to a completely different brain mapping here. It is a logical questioning generation that is reading our works. So if I want to write about Banaras or the Mahabharat or even the Devya Sutras, the interest in these epics continues only because of some very interesting interpretations with stimulating twists in their parallel universe. For example, if uh, if a young reader would come to me and ask about the battle of Mahabharata and the battle between the Pandavas and the Kauravas, I can give them a very interesting interpretation. I've used plenty of these in the book Lost and Found in Banaras. For example, tell them that imagine Draupadi as a human body. The Pandavas are the five senses wedded to the human body. The first cousins are 100 in number and they are the tendencies of the mind. Now, Yudhishthir thinks that he and his brothers, the five senses, can defeat the tendencies. The consequence was that if we lose everything if we gamble and give in to our tendencies, the 100 brothers. Now, there are upright people also in the Kaurav army, but Krishna tells the Pandavas to kill all of them because all good and bad tendencies should be exterminated. Now, Kurukshetra is the world in which we live, and life is a war between the senses and the mind's tendencies. So, readers read fiction to gain a different perspective, and the writer should be able to offer those to them, which I've done in Lost and Found in Banaras. Because sometimes I believe that a person needs to just leave their world and enter somebody else's world. Historical fiction and mythological fiction offers its readers a peep into the world that their character lives in. As a reader, I read to understand people I haven't met and the places that I haven't visited. Therefore, it does become a parallel universe. But when it comes to my readers, whether it was Banaras or even the Deve Sutras that is coming up with Readomania, I would like to convince my readers with a logical reasoning and not just try to appease them with anything which is airy fairy. No,
That's
convince
quite a
them.
mind-boggling analysis of Mahabharata that we put in, that brings into a different articulated point. And I'll hold on to that before I come back to it. But Kiran, the reason I wanted to come to you last in this question is that your predominant body of work is thrillers. Okay, and if I apply that question to you, how much reality and how much fiction, that's quite a borderline case about crime. So, what is your opinion on that? You're, I think, on mute.
I think nothing I could write could ever rival what actually happens, even if you just scan the City Briefs column every day in the newspaper. So there are much more horrific things happening in the world around, and we can only sort of gather bits and pieces of how devious the human mind can be. As thriller writers, I think it is our job to get into the human minds and the twists and turns it could take. But it's a wonderful, wonderful reality that we are only privy to a surface of from the outside, and and we can only hope to sort of skim the surface like a glacier. But Dipankar, apart from thrillers, there's a lot of short stories that I've written which are in the science fiction category, and I think their reality is alternate universes, yes. Parallel universes, yes. But they all, as I said before, take off from the reality that we're familiar with. Because I mean, you can't give a reader something that they aren't familiar with and expect them to. Even a thing like Terry Pratchett's wonderful series. I mean, it starts with a demolition squad trying to demolish the earth to make a super express highway, intergalactic highway. That is something everybody can relate to. That, right? Even if it is fantastical, we know about it. We know houses being demolished to make way for highways, so we can relate to it, even if it is multiplied on the scale of intergalactic highways. So alternate universes, yes, we write about them, but we keep it grounded in something the reader can relate to. So if I'm writing about, somebody who is doing away with his wife, we all know of somebody who has done that, right? We've read about them even if we don't know them personally. So
Absolutely. I think that takes me to another question. Yes, Rishi, before I can ask the
Yeah,
question, you go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah. Sorry to take over your role, but I just wanted to. I find the conversations both around Mona and Kiran very, very interesting. I mean, the description of five senses and Draupadi as the body is fantastic. And Kiran, do you think that people are interested more in more? Is it the darkness that is a variant in the society, and people are excited towards it? It's a reality, but it's a reality of only a very, very small section, and it attracts people. Or is it the darkness of every mind in a little degree that you are trying to address?
I don't know if it is the darkness in every mind that I'm trying to address, Rishi, to be honestly, but I think a lot of it is voyeuristic, a lot of it is catharsis, a lot of it is releasing the id that we don't allow to be released in everyday life. So that, yeah, to get your point, it's the same thing. You're fascinated by evil. You may not allow yourself to do evil because there's so much social and cultural policing that we go through as individuals from the time we're children to the time we become adults. But there is a dark fascination. I think everyone is fascinated. Why are serial killers the ones who get the most amount of marriage proposals when they are incarcerated? So people are fascinated by the bad,
Are
and
you referring to
that's
Charles Soberaj by any reason, by any chance?
oh, Charles Sobraj, and you just have to look at Ted Bundy and all of them. I mean, the kind of story, kind of the number of women who wanted to marry them.
I
One
know.
would think they would run miles from them, but no, they're fascinated by this.
The
The evil
Stockholm
fascinates
syndrome. The
also.
Stockholm syndrome.
Similar. Absolutely.
So so this all of this drives me to another question, the other side of it. So like reality drives fiction. Have you ever thought, can fiction drive reality? Can the reverse happen? Rishi, let's start with you.
I mean, if we go by Kiran's hypothesis, it certainly can. I mean, in terms of, but that's on a lighter note. I think if it's very difficult. Fiction can sometimes predict future. I mean, and maybe it's an accidental thing mostly, that you write about a pandemic happening like 20, 30 years ago, and this happens. So it's just a prediction. It can be.
Yeah.
It may also influence reality to younger minds, to impressionist mind, who go on to read something at an impressionable age. And even there is we are all vulnerable to getting affected at all ages. So you may read something, and then it may stick to our mind, and then they change ourselves in a little bit. That is possible. That is possible, but I don't think so. It's a norm. It's a norm.
Kiran, what do you have to say about that? Have you? I'm sure you must have seen somewhere where fiction inspires reality. Are you speaking because
Mute.
you're
Mute,
mute
mute
again?
again. Sorry, sorry,
And
sorry. Apologies. So I was reading Isaac Asimov's 2001: A Space Odyssey. Or that was it Arthur C. Clarke? Arthur C. Clarke. Sorry. And there was a paragraph in that, just a castaway paragraph about a synthetic virus released by China to take over the world. This was written in 1960s,
I know.
and it was just that one line in a very very non-important kind of a paragraph about them getting to the moon and all that. And it suddenly hit me because I was reading it just when the pandemic started. I said, oh. And then I realized, I mean, I've realized it for a long time, but suddenly I began sort of tracking the number of things that I have seen in science fiction movies or read in books, which are now true. These digital billboards, which are so real, which we saw in Blade Runner and which was written about in, I think, Neuromancer. I'm not sure which. No, no, no. Two androids count electric sheep. I forget the
And
title.
there are multiple references of a
Yeah,
Kindle-like element in
it's
books that we
made.
read in the
Yeah,
80s. Yeah, when
and
humans
lightsabers of Star Trek. I mean, we have the technology to have laser
were
swords right now. So,
space
the
fiction actually has a lot of reality. I mean,
yeah,
fiction that
yeah.
became reality later. In fact, for all you know, it is said that science fiction to a large extent inspires technology development. You know,
It
now
foresees it definitely. It's sets it on the track definitely because they know the direction we can go on. But the thing is, science fiction can inspire reality and even dystopian fiction. If you look at it, if you look at
yes,
something like The Road,
yes.
that could be a reality too, right? It could happen
Personal
anytime.
mobility in flying format. It is all till date fiction, but very soon I'm sure it's going to become reality. So individual flying cars or something like that. It,
Yeah,
I'm going to
and
twist this question slightly for Mona and bring it in a different way. We were speaking about fiction inspiring reality. Okay. Now there are a lot of times when we relate to a book, story, characters, emotions so much that it feels, hey, this is my story, this is my book. How does that happen?
That question is for me.
Yes, Mona, that's question to you.
Oh, yes. Could you come again, please? I think I just lost the
Yes.
last line there.
The reason I'm asking the question to you because this has come back to me from multiple people that after they
Yeah.
read Lost and Found in Banaras, they said, hey, this is me. This is my story. So that fiction became reality of somebody else's life. So how does that happen?
Well, that can happen very easily in case you are writing realism. Although Salman Rushdie once said that realism can actually break your heart, and that is true, right? But when you write about relatable characters, when I'm talking about Murshidabad, when I'm talking about the people, their occupations, their belief system, the marriages, and everything, so I found that people found them very relatable. And as Rishi said that, when we are talking about gray characters over there, most of us are gray. I mean, of course, we aren't bipolar people, we aren't black or white. So when you're talking about people, their fears, their their prejudices, their the darkness in their souls. Most of the time, people may not claim them to be true, but then they relate to them. And when we are talking about the women, my girls, Brinda and Sia over there, and Devi, so they were three different people over there. Sia was somebody who came across as very strong, and yet she was not a strong person within. So I was catering to one set of women over there. When it comes to Debi, she was somebody who was very fairy, very feisty, and somebody outspoken, very belligerent out there. People related with her. And then comes my little Brinda, the protagonist in the book, who was somebody who seemed very meek, very puny, but she was the strongest person out there. She was a person who had learned detachment while staying in attachment with other people. She was a child widow, but when it came time for Devi to go away, she shows and exhibits absolutely no emotion, because detachment was that easy. So perhaps I it was like a broad spectrum of emotions that I was catering to through these three women. And also then there was the Vasanti Bua, who was the oldest, the matriarch of the ashram, the all knowing. She was a voice of Krishna. So, and every setting in that book was a real setting. So when I was talking about Banaras, I was talking about the Manikarnika Ghat, the Dome Rajas. I was talking about the traditions over there. So people found that very, very relatable. And I'm lucky as an author when people write back to me and say that it was so evocative that we felt that we were in Banaras. So I'm blessed that ways.
I wanted a very different moralistic question to all three of you. Creators of fiction, be it any platform, books, movies, or any other content, are sometimes blamed that some of their content is leading to adverse impact on our societal norms. So it may influence people do certain things in a certain way, and hence, by that logic, makes all authors very, very responsible for what they put out in public. What do you have to say about that? Do authors hold responsibility? Should they hold responsibility? If not, if yes, where is the line being drawn? And I will start this time with Kiran. Kiran, you have to unmute.
You throw me under the bus first, huh, Dipankar? Where do we draw the line? Where do we take responsibility? That's a very loaded question, Dipankar, because very honestly, as authors, we are reflecting society, right? A lot of what we write is what we see around us. A lot of what we write is what we respond strongly to and what moves us enough to make us want to write about it. And very often, a lot of writing has led to social change. You have the wonderful Hazar Chaurasi Ki Ma Shweta Devi, which was on the next slide, the urban Naxalite
Okay,
situation.
hold
We
your
have
thought over there, Kiran. I'm going to take you and give an example the extremely other end. A lot of romance books actually talk about wooing girls, which
about,
about wooing girls, about
huh?
going after girls and making them agree to their proposals, which to a large extent would actually be stepping onto consent. Now, where
Hmm.
does one draw a line there? That is where I'm coming from. We know that fiction does drive positive things, but they also drive negative things and ideas. So, how does that balance come out?
So I think a lot of romance talks about wooing girls, but it depends on who is writing the romance, Dipankar. If you read a romance written by a woman and you read a romance written by a man, there will be very different kinds of wooing happening, and there will be very different responses. I think this generation and the current generation is aware enough and they know, understand consent agency. And you can have a super popular series like the Twilight series, but we all know that Edward Cullen was not borderline, he was stalking Bella.
Of course.
So
So, does
that
that
kind of wooing
mean
is
that?
disturbing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but yet the book was a hit. But I do think that we don't give readers credit enough to understand, to know that, they understand the fact that this is fiction. And wooing in this way is attractive in a book. It may be disturbing in real life. And the current generation don't underestimate them. They know exactly what is kosher and what is not. And
So
they
on that
get it.
point, sorry, I'm going to make it a little heated now. I'm going to come to Mona. Yes, I see you raising your hand, but I'm going to throw a bit of masala in that. So Kiran says our readers are intelligent and we should assume that they will take informed decisions. If I extrapolate that to movies, then why do we need a censor board in movies trying to cut out stuff which may influence the population indirectly? Should we not have a censor board for books then, Mona?
Well, I really wanted to answer that question, Dipankar. Thank you for throwing it at me. So I'm also under the bus with Kiran there. So, there is writing that makes a better job of the truth. It's fiction at the end of the day. I write lots of mythological and historical fiction, and that makes me a mixer, grinder of facts and fantasy. To me, there is nothing called fiction, as everything is experience. And of course, experiences differ from people to people. So one's non-fiction can be other person's fantasy also. Now, I would like to give an example here. When Malik Muhammad Jaisi wrote Padmavat, he perhaps had no idea that one day this story will replace the historical facts. At that time, he admitted that it was an allegorical tale, the story of the beautiful queen of Chittor and her luckless suitor, Sultan Alauddin Khilji. And it became part of the Rajput oral traditions and even in the Persian literature of the 17th and 18th century. Today, it's sacrilege to say that Padmavat was a fiction. Then, on the other hand, if our bedtime stories shape us, and grandma would swear by their authenticity, what happens when we learn that those absorbing, moving, raw stories were not true? Who would we become when we shed our illusions of the past? It can really shatter the social and the ethnic backcloth. So it is always the responsibility of the writer to draw the line somewhere. For example, what happens when most of us have read medical thrillers over here with, Rishi would understand that Robin Cook medical thrillers, Rishi, right?
Homa.
And even the crime stories or even the traditions that we follow. What if they were brought into action? Now, all these were fiction, but what if they're brought into action? Then all that which was pure imagination turns into reality. So, what as an author we must know is where to draw the line when we are writing. And my mantra is if it reports the truth, it is non fiction. But if it stretches the truth, it's fiction.
Interesting point. Rishi, coming to you, your book, The Sage, talks about a protagonist who's a doctor. A doctor author writing about a doctor protagonist. How how responsible were you feeling while putting out facts about your own profession?
So I probably, but I started writing the story as the protagonist being an investment banker. But when you are unrelated completely to a profession, you can't go beneath the skin of it. So ultimately, one third book on its course, I had to change it to be the protagonist to be a doctor. Although the book is not about anything about it's more about human relationship. It's not about medical profession per se. But I would agree. I mean, carrying on the conversation of the previous discussion, it's a very, very complicated question. How much responsible should one feel? I would completely agree with Kiran when she said that we must not underestimate the intelligence of our readers, so as to and do not assume a role so powerful that we are capable enough to change the norms of the society. But there is a bit of a dichotomy here. I think we have to respect sensitivities, but at the same point of time, you see some of the very insensitive stuff kind of being written and being appreciated, at least in the form of being bestsellers and in form of being sold. So maybe people are doing in private, people are reading in private what they are not willingly accepting in reality. And in terms of the sensitivity, there are two kinds of sensitivity here. I was thinking, like, should we step on sensitivities, should we not? Because if we don't step on sensitivities, we would we would be.
Have we lost Rishi?
I
Did you
think
lose
we
me for a
lost.
minute?
Yeah,
Yes.
Yeah, can you hear me
Very
now?
fine.
Yeah.
So when I, when when
Yeah.
when 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 I was thinking about sensitivities, then I was wondering what whose sensitivity are we bothered about? Because if we do not challenge the sensitivities and ideologies of powerful people in religion, in society, in politics, then probably no transformation will happen. But at the same point of time, if you step on the sensitivities for the marginalized section, for already weaker class, then it's really an issue. So I think we have to be sensitive enough not to be offensive to people on the margins. At the same point of time, a writer can, go all out and offend the sensitivities at his own peril. I mean, Salman Rushdie is a big example on his own peril. The sensitivity was a big and mighty, and take that chance, and that would be considered probably heroic. But if you step on the sensitivities on of the marginalized section, if you step on the sensitivities of the weaker sections, as we may call it, then probably it's not a fair thing to do for any person. It would be irresponsible.
okay. I think we're going on a very, on the heavier side of a discussion, and I want to bring in a lighter note here, and no other better person than Kiran to answer my question. Okay, pardon me for saying this, but a whole lot of people have got a very different sense of romance through the million rules in the tall, dark, handsome definition of what they get in a fantasy world. And when they hit reality and get something else, the reaction sometimes is not as great. Is that the negative side of fiction? When you read fiction that you expect something different and you get something different?
If you're going to expect your romance to mirror Mills and Boons, then, darling, you need serious counseling. So I would just say,
But wouldn't at a certain age you may want to expect that? You read and you realize that it could be a fictional TDH coming your way.
Dipankar, there's an age at which your hormones are, full bloom. At that
Raging.
age, yeah, they're raging. You tend to believe anything. But as you grow older, I think you get more sensible. Why blame fiction writers and Bills and Boons? Look at our romances in our movies itself. They're so unrealistic. So any romance is targeted at a feel good aspect. You need the happily ever after, you need the wooing, you need all that, you need all those elements in place. That is how the genre is. The genre is about a happily ever after at the end of it all. It goes through misunderstandings, separations, whatever each stage of conflict, and then there has to be a happily ever after. And that happily, what is a happily ever after at the end of the day, Dipankar? It is where you stop the story, right? If they're going to show like towels, wet towels on the bed and toilet seat fights everywhere, the happily ever after gets over. So a Mills and Boons is where you stop the story, and the romance is where you stop the story. uh, Everybody grows out of romances, but it is
Okay.
still the largest selling genre in the world. It continues to be looked down upon. Romance writers continue to be looked down upon, and they are the ones who are the bread and butter of the publishing industry, along with thriller writers. So I think there is definitely a demand for it. People read it to get what they're not getting out of real life. They don't expect it out of real life. That's why they're reading those books, right? And I think more power. You read whatever makes you happy, and you
Okay. Yeah,
are sensible enough to
that's a very
sensible enough
valid point.
to separate reality from fiction. I think, as I said before, let us not underestimate our readers.
Yeah, I think that's a very valid point, and I'm really happy that you mentioned that we all need our own fantasies to be able to get out of our real lives once in a while. So absolutely agree on that point. Continuing on something around your books, I have particularly found your settings to be very very different, unique, and interesting, and we've been discussing that you've taken a lot of inspiration from multiple places. So the latest where did that come from? How did tell us something about that? It's a completely different setting.
It's a completely different setting. It's a very different book. book, and like Mona, I do tend to draw a lot from real life. Mona's books are also very emotionally wrenching, very her protagonists are very strong women. I think all my protagonists, it all begins with the protagonist. And Rishi, I haven't read your book, unfortunately, so I don't know what it's about. But yeah, the settings come from locations where I see my protagonist place. So if there's a childhood, what is there in her childhood, and what would the childhood be? Here, and I needed a house which had a secret in it. So that's the old house in a hill town. I needed another house which was completely different from what she had grown up in. So that's the villa in Goa. And all these houses had secrets and whispers in corridors and little sounds and little creatures. And I'm not going to give more away for that. Everybody has to read my book.
Interesting. I think that's a very good way. But since you asked Rishi this question, that was my last question for the panel before I take the audience questions. Rishi, your book is fiction, yet appears to be narrating somebody's life real out of reality. Okay, a doctor who's going on a soulful journey. So tell us more about how did you come up with uh, you know, uh, the entire plot and the idea, and how did you come up with this whole storyline?
The plot kind of grew as
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 a
as
matter of
I
fact,
grew with the.
I would request all the panelists to keep a copy of their book to show after we finish discussion so that we can all see the book. Yes, Rishi, over to you.
So the plot kept on growing as I started writing, and I matured over years. But I think the essence that I was chasing was that, you know uh, subtly trying to understand one or the other conflicts or questions of human mind in a story form, so that it is not so obvious and not so open, but there is a subtle discussion in each chapter. So each chapter would subtly deal with one or the other conflicts of human mind, which are universal: the importance of faith, the importance of love, trust, all these things of human touch in modern day world. So all these things are discussed subtly in each particular chapter, not in a very obvious form, but you get a feel of their conversation. And it's not a dogmatic uh, do this, do that. It's kind of a conversation between the characters. So the plot essentially rolls on this ethos of trying to address the conflicts of human mind, and the story developed as I wrote. Yeah.
Very interesting. On that note, we have a very interesting question from our audience as well. Santosh Bakaya is asking, but even in fiction, autobiography elements creep in inadvertently. However hard you try to keep them at bay, I think. And I'm going to start this question again from Rishi because Rishi is writing. Rishi is a doctor himself and is writing about a protagonist who's a doctor. So was that an autobiographical attempt?
No. I don't think so. That it kind of the autobiography kind of speaks. And when you say it's autobiography, you are trying to narrate the instances from your own life. So the books are not essentially narration of our own life story. But of course, any book, whatever we write as fiction, has to take inspiration from the people that we have met, the situations that we have been in, the thoughts that we have, the emotions that we have felt over a period of time. So in that sense, it is not disconnected from us. It is connected to our lives and whatever we have felt and seen and been exposed to and have thought. But it's not essentially an autobiography. In terms of, most of the authors will agree that they will not their life instances will seep in the book, but not essentially the narration of their life story.
Interesting. Kiran, what's your take on this? How much of autobiographical elements do you put in your books?
So it's a very loaded question, Dipankar. Thanks, Santosh. Hi, good to see you here. Uh, I agree with Rishi that there will be elements of your own life because you've experienced it and you can draw on those emotions and describe them the best. But it's not your story. You would be doing yourself and your readers a disservice if you're telling them your story. And let's face it, our stories are not interesting enough to be told. So let's not kid ourselves. Having said that, I think one's first book is always an exercise in writing about oneself. And once we exercise that, we get it out of our system, we can go on to writing other stories. So maybe Rishi's placing himself, a doctor as his protagonist was part of that exorcism. My first book, The Reluctant Detective, had K. Mehra, and even Kitty Party Murder has K. Mehra. And many people have felt she is very similar to what I am. So maybe I've taken, that bit out of my suburban gated community, school gate mom life has gone into the building of that character. I'm not going to take much more time. In my current book, More Things in Heaven and Earth, they've asked me how have you written about, somebody losing their husband so early and written so well. But I saw my mother going through that. So that's an autobiographical an experience I could draw on, I could mine on. Everything is material for an author. Every experience we go through in life is material, good, bad, ugly. So don't be nasty to authors. I keep telling everybody, we'll kill you or we'll write about you. You're on mute, Dipankar. Can't hear you.
You're mute. You are mute, Dipankar.
You're mute.
Mona, are you there? Do you hear me?
Yeah.
Now we can.
Yes. Mona, what's your opinion?
I think writing is a very lonely, a very silent, and a very cathartic profession. So, as I really agree with Kiran when she says your first book is like all about yourself, everything that you wanted to vent to the world outside. But then it's after that that the writer in you emerges, because you have written, it's been accepted by people, and now you feel that your pen should create some magic, the magic which was not inherently your own life or your experience that you drew from, but it is a magic that you create. So we also start observing. It does not just limit itself to the whale. I mean, it's not just limit itself to lifting the veil of what was there inside you. It also gets creative. It is also about a keen sense of observation, the people you have observed. What do you think about them? So I guess it becomes three dimensional, how you see things. Then you also try to understand why other people do things the way they do it. And thirdly, what would you have to say about those things? It's not just limited to you alone, but about other things as well. So it's about both reality as well as fiction that comes together. I'm reminded of a quote: he was a star, he was a sky, never one but always together. So, this is what happens when you start observing and writing. It is not just about yourself, but yes, your inherent beliefs, your experiences also stay, but then it is an alloy of the observations of the outside world also. It just doesn't limit itself to you anymore.
I think that was a wonderful answer. And on that note, I'd like to close the panel. But before I close the panel, may I request the panelists to please show your body of work or your books, whatever you have near you, to the screen so that we all can appreciate your work. It will be a pleasure to see your books once, actually. If you do not have the physical book, you may show us on the phone. If you do not have it, it's absolutely okay. That's for us, the books that we have.
Wow.
Oh my God, Mona really got us everything. Thank you so much. So, audience, it was lovely having you. It is a pleasure. Yeah, that's Rishi's book on his phone, The Sage. Yes, thank you so much. Mona, Kiran, Rishi, it was an absolute delight to be discussing fiction and reality with you. I just could ever see, I really hope that the panel will never ended, but there's a little less time. We have a few questions which we cannot answer and take because they're out of time. So thank you everyone again. It was a pleasure. And audience, you were lovely. You were great. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank
Such
you,
a pleasure to
Dipankar.
interact with Kiran and Rishi. Thank you, Dipankar.
Pleasure. Thank you. Pleasure to meet all of you.
Thanks,
Thank you
Manjari,
for this
inviting us.
wonderful, insightful discussion. We are sure our audience enjoyed every bit of it. Thank you, Kiran Manral, Mona Verma, Rishi Sethi, and Dipankar Mukharjee for being our PILF guests. The last discussion of the day is in 15 minutes. Please join us at 9:15 p.m. for a debatable discussion: literary agents, bridge or barrier.